All right, so today we are going to wrap up or come to the end of our 4Ds, discovery, define, design, and develop. Today we are going to be mostly focused on develop and talking about how to prepare our designs and our assets for developing the websites in HTML and CSS. Before we jump into that, I just want to do a very quick review of discover, define, design, and see if you guys have any questions about any of that, or if that's pretty clear, then it should be a fairly quick overview. So the first thing that we covered in this class is discover. So it's basically the research and the analysis behind understanding your market, understanding your users, understanding your competition, and doing market analysis, which is traditionally done by a brand strategist, and then also talking about competitive visual audits, which is, again, typically done by a designer, to take a look at the visual assets and color schemes and typography and media that the competition's websites are using. So you can basically know if you're going to fit into that world, stand out from that world, blend into it, avoid using the same colors and typefaces that your competitors are using to avoid confusion between the two of you. So the first thing that we do is look at the market and do an analysis of that by asking a few questions like, what is your market? Who is your user? Who are your competitors? There could be more specific questions around this as well. These are just kind of high level, basic questions that you want to ask, but it's always good to go into more detail at this research stage to better understand who you're designing for, what you're building for that particular demographic, and how you should design it for that particular group of individuals and that particular market. Then also understanding who is already in the market, what type of competitors are you up against? If it's like a flower website, then who are your competitors? Is it like 1-800-Flowers, etc.? Once those questions are answered, then we can do a competitive visual audit by looking at our competitors' websites and digital content, essentially digital brands. And to do that, we take a screenshot of all of our competitors' websites, so we can do better analysis and look at them as a group, as a whole, and as individuals. We find the grid of their websites to understand how everything's laid out. We look at the color palette they're using, the typefaces and the type hierarchy, and then also do analysis of any of the media that they're using on their websites, like images or video, audio, anything like that. So we want to know too. So that's basics behind discovery and the research process before we even get into any sort of design, UX or UI design. I guess this is technically part of UX design. So the next stage is define. So it's once you understand your audience, understand who you're designing for, then you want to dive into the define stage of defining what the website is going to be by looking at and creating sitemaps, doing sketches of how the website is going to be designed, just general layout, where different pieces are going to go on that layout, and then doing more refined wireframes based off of those sketches. So here's a basic sitemap. We start with our home page and then branch out from there. So below that is our secondary pages, and then below that is tertiary pages. Then obviously you can just keep on going lower and lower and lower, depending on how much content and how many pages you have. There's also links called and pages called global pages, which aren't necessarily like within the traditional structure of a sitemap, like tree, but they might be connected to and linked to from every single page, like in your footer or in your header somewhere. Once we understand how the sitemap is going to be structured and what pages are going to be attached to the home page, how many secondary pages we have, how many tertiary pages, how many global pages we have, then we could start the kind of sketching or like design ideation process. So these are just some sketches. Again, it could be very rough. Use just simple lines or squiggly lines for text. You can do a box with like an X in it to represent an image. So this is just to get like what's in your mind, what ideas are kind of popping in your mind when it comes to how you think this should look based on all the research that you've done already, and then getting that onto paper. Just the quickest way to do that is to use pen or pencil and just sketch it out onto paper to get it out of your head and into a visual format that you can then share or refine and make multiple versions of very quickly. It's always good to annotate your sketches so you know what everything is going to be, especially if it's just squiggly lines and boxes. You might forget what that represents, like if it gets put on hold and you have to come back to it. But this is more important if you are working with a team. Like if you're the designer and working with the developer, you want to make it very clear to the developer what's going to go where and how things are going to interact with, how the user is going to interact with the different elements on your website. So that's why we do annotations on our sketches and in our wireframes to remember what we did there and why we did it, and then also to share that with anyone that we're working with that's part of our team. So once we have our sketches kind of figured out and have determined like the general path that we're going to go for with our designs, then we can do a more refined wireframe that is done in the computer using something like Illustrator or Sketch or Figma. You can use those as well. But basically taking your sketches and refining them, creating a grid, adding the placement for all your content. So everything is just a little bit more crisp. And then also it's always good to have annotations on this, especially if you're going to be sharing this with the developer as well. So after define, we have design. So design is basically taking the work that you've done to date and taking the wireframes that you just created and essentially adding color schemes and typography, type hierarchy, imagery, any other media that you think you want to include. Also thinking about, since this is an interactive environment, what hover states you want to have or any other type of interactivity you want to include. So that's the design stage. So here we're just talking about our canvas and our format, which is going to be the browser window, and then playing around with the different forms and shapes that are going to go on there. Again, this is our canvas in this environment, in this world. Our canvas is going to be the browser window. This canvas could be different sizes depending on the device that you're looking at the website on. So it could be on a phone, it could be on a tablet, it can be on a desktop. I think for this class, we're going to mainly focus on desktop, but that's something that you should also consider is what is your website going to look like? What's the design going to look like when you go from these different devices, from larger screens to smaller screens? So that's something to consider. And then what are we going to put on it? How is it going to look? Are we going to have images or video? What typeface are we going to use? What type content are we going to have? Are we going to have headers and subheaders and body copy? Is there going to be a logo or a logo type or a graphic? Are we going to use iconography to represent different things? So there's a lot of questions around the different bits of design and style that you're going to include on your website. You should have, at this point, already considered what general grid system you want to use. Again, we talked about plenty of them. The one that I'm suggesting just to kind of play around with in this class is the 960 grid system, broken down into either 16 or 12 columns. And then you can kind of play around with the arrangement of the size of those columns and positioning. But you can also do like the golden ratio, you can do grids on a diagonal, doesn't have to be horizontal and vertical. So there's lots of different options. As long as you have a grid, that's the important thing, that there's structure to your designs, that we have a grid so things don't feel like they're floating around, that everything is kind of anchored to each other and to a grid system. So that's why we use a grid. So it looks clean and anchored and easy to visually navigate from like top to bottom, left to right. Typography is really important for this class, especially when it comes to small like body copy, since we're dealing with screens. albeit most of the screens today are like super high res, so they can handle a lot of pixels in a small space. But traditionally, for digital environments and web environments, we use sans serif fonts, so without the little feet, just because the feet kind of get a little blurry and grainy on a digital format versus on a print format. So smaller text, I still recommend probably using a sans serif font, anything that's like 10 point or below for a screen. Anything above that, you're probably fine using a sans serif. So for like header and subheaders, those are probably going to be like 24 point and higher. Then sans serif is totally fine. But anything that's really small, I would suggest really considering using a sans serif typeface. But yeah, that's a huge consideration, is what typeface you're going to use for your designs. We talked about color too. So we are working in a digital environment and a screen-based environment. So our color wheel is different than kind of the traditional primary colors that we worked with when we were in primary school. We are using RGB, which is red, green, and blue, and a mix of those to create different colors. And that's because the screens that we use red, green, and blue lights and different percentages of those values to create different colors for us to see on a screen. So this is a color wheel that we're going to use for this class because we're working with screen-based designs rather than print-based designs. Then lastly, we did a little Photoshop breakdown on how to design websites using Photoshop. Again, you feel free to use any other platform you want to use that makes sense for this class. So it'd be like Figma or Sketch or Adobe, I think XD. But for this class, I'm just going to mainly focus on Photoshop since we all have access to Photoshop in this class. Before we kind of jump into the HTML, CSS side of things, we kind of have to prepare our designs and our artwork to be used in a programming environment and to start developing our HTML and CSS websites. So before we get into that, we're going to jump into just talking about website prep, asset creation, and organization when it comes to creating the images that we're going to use in our website, figuring out the typefaces, understanding the dimensions of everything, since we're going to have to know that to create the assets in HTML and CSS. And then also, we're going to talk about organizational structure of our file root directory system. When it comes to anything web related, everything is linked to each other. Meaning we have to know where like our images live, know where, if we're using a custom typeface, we have to know where that lives in our folder structure. We have to know where our CSS file lives and our JavaScript file and our HTML file, because everything is linked to each other. So if something like moves after we start developing and programming this, then that'll break that link unless we go in and fix it. So it's really important to be incredibly organized with your file system, especially when it comes to HTML, CSS, and just web development in general, because again, everything is just linked together and we have to know where it lives in that file structure. The first thing that we want to do is go into our Photoshop file or Figma or Sketch file, and I personally like to turn on my grid system, take a screenshot of it, and then measure out the distance between all of the grid lines. So this is what I ultimately have once I finish my design and I'm ready to go into development and start programming. I want to know like the distance between the top of the screen and the top of the header area. In this case, it's 52 pixels. I want to know the height of the header area and the logo, which is 130 pixels. The space below the logo, like the padding as well, I want to measure that, along with all of the other space that we're using. The more important part is getting anything that's going to be fixed. So any of the like padding or space that's going to be a constant, we want to have a pixel size for. But anything like if there's text here, then this is probably gonna, it's not as important to know the height of the text box because it's gonna expand and contract based off of like the size of the browser or based off of the content that you're putting into it. So we really just need to know like anything that's going to be a fixed height to know what that pixel value is. And we're using pixels instead of inches or centimeters because pixels is what we use for dimensions in HTML and CSS. So then we have the dimensions of the columns too. So the width is pretty standard, especially if you're just doing desktop programming for a desktop. So the width we want to know too. So this is 220 pixels for each of these 4 columns. So this is all helpful information to have before you even start development because you're going to need to know these values to plug it into your code to start developing this. So in Photoshop, this is kind of how I do it. I use the marquee tool, the rectangular marquee tool, and then kind of click and drag between the guidelines to get the height or the width of that particular area of my design. And then I have the info window open onto the side, and then you can change this to be pixels or inches or centimeters. You want to make sure that's on pixels. And then you can see that it's going to give you the pixel height and width of this box. So that's generally what I do to measure anything in my Photoshop design. So the next thing you want to do is kind of make a list of all of your assets when it comes to like the typeface you're using, whether it's bold or regular or light. You want to make a list of the size that type is, so the pixel size for that type, and then also the color in hexadecimal values. So remember, hexadecimal starts with the number sign, and then there's 6 digits after that. That could be numbers or letters. And then also for like hover states, what are the hover states going to look like? You want to make a list, include that into your list. So is there going to be, for links, is there going to be no underline on load, but yes underline when you hover over it? So this is like our type hierarchy. So header, subheader, body copy, and then links for load state, and then links for active state or hover state. Below that, we also want to know like any sort of background colors that we're using for our design. Is there a background color for the header or the body or the footer? So we want to include that as well. And then any other colors that you might be using. So if you have like a design that has like a border color around a box or a line that's using a color or something like that, you want to know what that hex value is. So and easily like available to you. So when you start programming, start putting all the stuff in the CSS and HTML, then you don't have to go searching for it in your Photoshop file. It's just there for you, and you just do like copy and paste into your code. So it's always good to have that, like do that prep work, have it there available to you. So once you start programming, you don't have to go searching for it. So again, in Photoshop, when it comes to finding out the colors that you're using, you can use the color picker and have the color window open. So when you select the color picker and click on any of the background colors or text color, it'll tell you what color it is in the color window. You want to make sure that you are changing this from like RGB or CMYK to web color sliders. And then that'll give you the breakdown of the hexadecimal values for red, green, and blue. Again, hexadecimal is just another way of saying RGB, but in a different format. So this is going to be the first 2 letters, first and second letter, the third and fourth letter or value, and then the 5th and 6th value in the hex number. All right. So now for images. So any of the images that you are using, you obviously need to know the desired height and width of that image and crop it down to that size. So here, this image is going to be 374 pixels by 460 pixels. And these images are going to be 191 pixels by 220 pixels. So once you know that those dimensions, then you can create a new documents to those dimensions and bring in the images that you want to crop down and just kind of put them in place and then export. Or you could bring them into the Photoshop file and slice them out using the image slicer. So for these, you can create new files for the images. So this is like my main image file, Photoshop file. And then I could bring in all my main images I might be using for that particular area, for that size, because this is the right width and height that I need. For images, I would suggest doing 150 DPI instead of 72, since we're using a lot of like retina displays and like high resolution displays. 72 looks a little bit pixeled and blurry. So I would use 150 pixels or 150 DPI. So yeah, so I'd create separate Photoshop files for the images, then bring in the images in on different layers, and then export for web, save for web at the dimensions and the size that I want it to be at. So for that, for saving for web, you go to File, Save for Web, and then you get this kind of window pop up. So here you can see that you have a couple options at the top. There's you can view this as the original. I could view this as the optimized version. And then you could do some comparisons based off of multiple optimized versions. So I really just keep it on the optimized version pretty much all the time. And then there's a bunch of presets that come in Photoshop that you can select. So if you hover over this and then click on it, you can select different image file types that are specifically designed for web. So there's a bunch of different GIF options at the top. There's some JPEG options here and PNG options below. So you can just kind of go in here and select them, see what the difference looks like visually, and find the one that works best for you. And then you could also play around with the like parameters and customize it. So if you want it to be like super high resolution, then you could do like JPEG high, but that's usually like 80% resolution. And so you can pump that up to 100% if you wanted to. So there's some customization that you can play around with too. When it comes to the choosing what presets and what file type to use for the web, this is what I usually suggest. So anything that has very minimal colors, that's like a graphic, an icon, an illustration that has a background color, then I would use a GIF or a GIF, however you want to call it. Anything that's full color, like a picture that you shot on your phone or camera, you want to use a JPEG. And then anything that has like minimal colors with a transparent background, like logos or logo types, then you want to save that as a PNG image. You can do transparent backgrounds on GIFs, but it's not very crisp around the edges. You still would get some like white outline around Nike here. But if you use a PNG, then an export as a PNG, then it's going to be really crisp and it'll be transparent. So if you have like a background color that's like, I don't know, green or something, then you would see the green showing up around the Coca-Cola logo and it'd still look crisp. Another option, which most people in this class are not going to use, is an SVG. So you can design and export SVGs from Illustrator. Stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. And that's basically what it is. It's a vector file that you can load into a website. So the great thing about SVGs is that you can scale them up and scale them down, and it'll maintain its crispness and it won't pixelate at all because it's vector instead of pixel based. But PNGs are fine for the purposes of this class. So another thing to consider is file size with your images. You don't want to have massive file sizes because it's just going to take so long to download and load onto your website. So when you go to Save for Web on the bottom left-hand side, when you go through these presets, you could see that this is going to change. It's going to give you the file format. It's also going to give you the file size, so how big it's going to be. And then also you can look at how quickly it's going to load on these different modem speeds, essentially. On the drop down here, you can change that to be like different modem speeds. This is good to look at. You want to keep this file size value as low as possible without losing any sort of the crispness of the image itself. So it's kind of like a little bit of a game when you're playing around with the type of image and the quality of the image, along with the size of the file and how quickly it's going to load onto any website. If it takes longer than like a couple of seconds to load an image, I guarantee you someone's gonna like close the site and not even bother looking at your website. So this is really important to make sure that everything loads quickly, but also still is very clean and crisp, and the quality isn't degraded because of the speed of the load. Because you can visually see the difference between changing the quality in the image, and then you can also see like how quickly it's going to load onto a website. So it's really helpful when it comes to creating image assets for your site. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is our file system organization. Hopefully you're not the person who has like 200 files just floating around your desktop. If you are, then you might have a issue adjusting to this. But no offense if you are that person, that's totally fine. But for the purposes of developing a website, it's important to be very clean and structured with the directory of files and folders that you're working with. So here's kind of an example of what the file structure would look like, and then also what the URL would look like based off of that structure. Index.html is always going to be the homepage. It might say index.htm, which works too, but that's always going to be the main page. Like if someone goes to dannywu.com, that's going to be my index.html page, which is going to be my homepage. So when you go to like dannywu.com or myurl.com, this is what gets loaded automatically. So that the homepage is always going to be called index.html or index.htm. Then if we have any secondary pages, so I'm going to create a folder called secondary page. So this is a folder. And then inside that folder, I have another index.html file. So if I go to myurl.com/secondary page, which again is the folder, then it's going to load the index.html file right off the bat. We could say secondary_page and /index.html, and it'll do the same thing, but we don't need to. The index.html in any folder is going to be the default file that gets loaded. So if we had another page inside this secondary page folder, like if this was, for instance, our portfolio, and we had a number of different portfolio projects in here that had separate HTML files, then you would have like, I don't know, website project.html or illustration project.html or something like that. So for the URL, it would be myurl.com/secondary page, which again is a folder, and then the file name, the HTML file name that is in that folder. This takes a little while for people to wrap their head around it. So no is a perfectly fine answer to that question. We're going to be talking about it for a little bit longer. So traditionally, it's always good to have like an image or an assets folder too, where you could put all of your images in and any other assets that you might have, like typefaces, fonts, etc. Movies, audio. So those can all go into like an assets folder. So you want to keep that all clean and organized in its own folder. And then to get to that, it would be myurl.com/ the folder name, which is img / the file name that lives in that folder to get to it. And this is how you would work with it if you're loading an image onto any one of these pages. You would have to know this kind of path. Same thing goes for all of your other assets and files. I usually put my CSS files into a CSS folder, and then my JavaScript files into a JavaScript folder. Again, just for cleanliness and clarity.
Is this file in the coding program, or is just the file that we organize in our desktop?
Both. So this is going to be like all our code is going to be in our HTML files and our CSS files. We're not really going to talk much about JavaScript in this class. But yeah, this is kind of how we are going to program a website and the structure of all the files that are associated to that website. So yes, it's going to be what the website's structure is going to look like behind the scenes. This is what any website looks like behind the scenes for the most part. So when it comes to like programming in our HTML and like linking to these images to have them show up on our HTML page, we don't need to have like the URL because this is kind of where we live. So we can kind of drop this URL for the purposes of programming and say just link to secondary page from index.html. Link an image like my image 1 to this page and have it show up when we load this page. So all we need to know is where the folder is and or where the file is, what folder it's in, and how it's related to and positioned to the like web page we're going to be loading it on. So this whole thing is called our root directory. This is a root file, which is kind of like the main file and main directory. And then inside our root directory, we have like subdirectories, which are folders here. This is kind of what the structure looks like when it comes to putting a website together and where all the assets and HTML files and CSS files live. And this is kind of what it looks like in your desktop, essentially. We're going to be using glitch.com, which is the programming environment for this class. So we're not going to be doing anything on the desktop. Everything is going to be in the browser window, but it's still good for you guys to know how to set this up like locally too. So essentially it's just a file. This one's called, or a folder. This one's called example. In that folder, this is all of our HTML files and images and all the assets that we need for our website. And then when we load each one of these like HTML pages in the browser, then it's going to be loading in like the images and the CSS file and the JavaScript file that are related to that HTML page. You can have multiple index.html files. You don't need to have multiple index.html files. If this is confusing to you, then you could just use index.html as like your home page, and then have all the other files just saying like, just name them like the project 1, project 2, project 3, etc. If I wanted to go from this HTML, which is our home page, if we want to go from our home page to the secondary page, then we could type in secondary underscore page 01, which is the folder name. And then it would automatically load in the index.html. Or we could be more specific about it and say, okay, and then / index.html to find that. For anything that isn't an index.html file, then we have to be specific about the file name itself. So we have to, if we want to go from the home page, which again is index.html in the root directory, then we have to go into the folder, secondary page 01, and then / another page.html. So if we're going from home page to this page, that's how we have to link to it. We have to know where it lives compared to where we are. And then if we wanted to go back, this is new for you guys, but if we wanted to go back to the home page, if you do a .. that means go back one file or one folder. So go out of this folder and into the main root directory. Then it's .. If you're inside like multiple folders, then it would be dot dot forward slash dot dot forward slash dot dot forward slash, depending on how many folders you're in. So you could do that. And then again, it's just going to load the index.html file in that folder. But you could also be more specific about it and say, okay, I want to load index.html in that folder. So basically, again, if you're going back and out of the folder you're currently in, then it's a dot dot forward slash. Yeah, I think the most important thing is knowing where things live in your file structure and your root directory. Based off of that, you know, like this file is in the just whole root directory. This file is in a subfolder called secondary page 01. Based on that information, you know how to get to this one because you know the file, the folder it's in. And then just going back, just remember it's a dot dot to go back one, like back out of that folder you're currently in and into the previous one. So the dot dot is something that just, yeah, you get used to and just try and remember. So again, it'll probably make more sense once we start like building it out in the next like 2 weeks and playing around with these links, within our root directory. So the more you do it, the more easily you're going to understand what's going on. But this is very confusing for anyone I talk to and show this to initially. So if you are confused, you're not alone, and you'll get it in time, and we'll kind of do it together and repeat the process over and over again. So it shouldn't be too long before you're comfortable with it. So today we're going to be doing just a very brief talk about the basics of HTML. We're really just going to talk about a couple of different elements in HTML, text and links today. And then over the next couple of weeks, we are going to be talking more about like lists and images, tables, forms, audio, and video. So yeah, so today we're just going to focus on text and links for now. Before we jump into that, just want to talk about programming environments. So the programming environment we're going to be using for this class, which we'll talk a little bit more about later today, we'll get you guys up to speed on Glitch, which is what we're going to be using in this class. Glitch is basically just an online programming environment where you can go to a browser, go to glitch.com, create projects in your account that are simple projects or more complicated projects. So you can do stuff as simple as just like a basic HTML and CSS website. You can do stuff that's more complicated, like backend development and database structuring. So it's pretty powerful. I've never used this in this class before, but I think it's going to be good to use, especially since we're all remote. Another great aspect of Glitch is that we can collaborate on code. So you can share your code with me and we can like program along together. Yeah, so I think it's probably the best environment for us to use for this class, especially since we're remote. So glitch.com is what we're going to use. It's free. Another great thing about Glitch is that it's free. You can upgrade if you wanted to. The only bad thing about Glitch is that if you don't upgrade and pay for it, then if your website has been loaded in like a day or two, then it's going to be put to sleep for until someone goes to it, and then it takes a minute for it to like wake up and display your site. But it's not a big deal. It's not even a minute. It's probably like, I don't know, 5 seconds or something. But it's fine for the purposes of this class. That said, there are lots of other options when it comes to programming anything, websites or beyond. I traditionally like to use this application called Sublime Text Edit because programming is just writing text essentially. You can use really any text editor that isn't like a rich text editor like Word, like Microsoft Word, but any other text editor you can use to write code and program in. So I personally like Sublime Text. Again, this one's free as well. There's lots of other options too. There's Notepad, Visual Studio, there's Coda and Atom. These are all very popular ones. So if you start to get into like more programmatic stuff, then you're probably going to be using like one of these platforms, one of these programming environments to write your code. Yeah, CS majors love Visual Studio. I haven't used it that much, but I've heard it's really great. I know a lot of people like Atom a lot. Yeah, I don't. I've just been using Sublime Text for forever, so that's what I'm used to. But I should probably switch over to something like Atom or Visual Studio. I think there's a little bit more that comes with it. Yeah, lots of extensions. So we'll talk about glitch.com a little bit more at the end of this lecture. Maybe I'll do like a little demo, get a quick and dirty website up and running. But yeah, we'll talk more about glitch in a little bit. When it comes to building a website in HTML, it's very similar to kind of the structure of a newspaper, for instance. So a newspaper has a header at the top, some header copy, some body copy, image, subheaders. So this isn't much different than how HTML was kind of originally designed and created. It's meant to be just for like researchers and scientists to put together just basic information, or actually detailed information around the research or findings that they found. And all that really needed was those elements at the time. It just needed a header, subheader, body copy, images, maybe like quotations, stuff like that. But that's about it. That's kind of what the initial purpose of HTML was used for, just basic information sharing between scientists and research community. So that's how HTML was originally developed and conceived. So when it comes to the basic HTML structure, we have a tag, HTML tag called HTML. Then we have an open and close tag. So an open tag is just the tag with the brackets around it. And the close tag is the same. It just has a / in front of the tag name. So anything between the open and close tag in this HTML element is going to be an HTML object. So that's how the browser knows. That's how our code is recognized as HTML code and not something else. Also, the file name is .html, so that's another way to recognize it. But this is the basic structure of our code for HTML. Inside of the HTML tags is a nested body tag. And body is basically anything that shows up in the browser window is going to be in the body tag. So everything that gets loaded in the browser window and visible when you go to the website is going to be inside this body tag. So inside body, we have the open and close tags. We have our header. We have a paragraph, a subhead, another paragraph, another subhead, and then another paragraph. And the headers are represented by H, and then there's a number value after it. But I think by default, there's H1 through H7. And each one has, by default, is going to be a different size. So this one, H1 is going to be larger, then I think it gets progressively smaller as you get to H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, H7. And then P is representing paragraph. So P represents paragraph. That's the HTML tag for paragraph. So this is what our HTML would look like. And then once it's loaded in the browser, this is what it would look like in the browser window. So the browser is taking that HTML code and converting it to something that's a little bit more visually pleasing. So we have our header at the top. This is our H1, our paragraph header, a subheader, which is H2, paragraph, another H2, and paragraph. So that's going from this HTML, we load it into the browser, and then it converts it to something that's a little bit more interesting and easy to read. The basic structure of HTML is made up of these tags that have represented by a character like P or H1, 2, 3. There's lots of other ones. And then there are these left and right brackets surrounding the tag. This is an open tag, and the close one is very similar. It just has a / in front of the tag name. So that's how you know that there's an opening and a closing, and you can kind of think of this as a box. Everything, all the contents inside of the open and close tag is just going into that box. So all the text is going to go into that paragraph tag box, essentially. Yeah, I think once you start building a like basic website, playing around with these tags makes more sense because you are coding something and then seeing it visually interpreted in the browser and then changing it and seeing it change. So I think, yeah, once you do that a little bit more, you're going to get used to these tags and what they represent and how to use them. Honestly, when it comes to HTML, it's more about just knowing what tags to use for what purposes. So it's sort of just memory and repetition. Going beyond that, same thing with CSS. It's a lot of just memory and repetition of tags and values. Technically, HTML and CSS aren't programming languages. They're considered markup languages because they're not, you can't technically program anything beyond just referencing a tag and putting a value into it. JavaScript is considered the programming language for the web because you can do, create functions and objects and do for loops and if statements. So that's really what a programming language allows you to do. This is just kind of like a tag represents something and you apply a value to it for the most part. That's why it's called a markup language. The more you do it, the more easily understandable it's going to be for you. So, and you're going to have a lot of practice over the next couple of weeks. So this is a really great example of a basic website. We have our HTML open and close tags. Inside of that, we have our body open and close tags. And then we have a new tag. This one's called head. So anything that we need for our website that isn't going to show up in the browser window visually goes inside the head. So one of the best examples for that is title. So at the top of any website browser window, when you go to a website, it's going to have like the name of the website, maybe some more information at the top. Same thing in like the tabs that you have when you have multiple windows open. So this is how you add that title to that website. So you put it in head under the title, open and close tag, and then the contents of what you want it to say in between those two tags. So this would be displayed here. So technically it's not in the browser window, so it shouldn't be part of the body, but it's still information that we want to include for our website at the top of the browser window itself. So because of that, that goes in the head and not in the body. Other things that would go in the head would be like other CSS files that you're linking to, JavaScript files that you're linking to, anything that you want to load before you load the rest of your HTML would probably go in the head. And then anything that you want visible in the browser window itself is going to go in the body. So any like headers or subheaders or text or images that you want it to be displayed in the browser window itself is going to go in body and be displayed there. So again, when it comes to learning HTML, it mainly just involves learning a list of elements or tags that you're going to be using for different types of content for your website. So it's just memorization, repetition, and Googling to figure out like what tag you need to use for what element you're trying to add to your website. Yeah, and then once you know what tags that exist and are available to you, how to use them appropriately in your design. So yeah, that's kind of what HTML is. It's just a lot of memorization, repetition, and understanding what all these tags, this library of tags represent and how to use them. Here are some heading tags. So I thought it went to 7, but apparently it goes to 6. So we have H1, H2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And by default, those are just different sizes, type sizes, essentially, for headers and subheaders. So this is our HTML, and this is what it would look like when it's loaded in the browser. So the main head, H1, is going to be the largest, and then it's going to progressively get smaller and smaller as you get to H6 for header 6. Again, when we get to CSS, all of this could be overridden with CSS. So if you want it to be a different size, a different color, or a different typeface, a different background color, etc., you can change that with CSS. But HTML is, again, it was designed for researchers and scientists to just share information, share data, share findings. So there's not a lot of, there wasn't a lot of concern around design or color or, typeface at the time. So that's why CSS was created and invented for us to add style and design to our websites. So P, again, represents paragraphs. So that's the tag for paragraphs in HTML. So we have an open tag and a close tag. And then again, all of our contents gets flowed in between. It's just like a box. You're putting your paragraphs inside of this paragraph box, and then that gets loaded onto a web page. So this is our HTML. And then when we load it into the browser, this is what it looks like. So because we have 2 paragraphs here, it's adding it a little bit of padding by default between the 2 paragraphs. So even though this is like very basic HTML, you can add some typographic elements like bold and italic. So bold would be just a B. That's what the HTML tag is. And there's an open and close tag, and anything in between is going to be bold. Italic is just an I. That's the HTML tag, and anything in between is just going to be italicized. So here's the HTML, and this is what it looks like when it's loaded in the browser. Again, this was meant for researchers and scientists, so you can do superscript and subscript, which would make sense for that demographic. So superscript is going to be SUP is the tag. Subscript is SUB, so soup and sub. And then anything in between is going to be superscript or subscript. So this is HTML, and this is what it looks like in the browser. So again, superscript goes above, subscript goes below the baseline. So when it comes to HTML, white space is ignored. If you have like a bunch of spaces in between your text here, or returns in between your text for this paragraph, once it's loaded in the browser, it's going to ignore all of these spaces and condense them down to a single space. So this is the HTML with a bunch of white space, unnecessary white space. And this is what it looks like when it's loaded in the browser, just ignoring all that white space. So you could also do line breaks. Line breaks are represented by BR, which stands for break, which makes sense. So a lot of these tags make sense when it comes to what they do. So BR stands for break, line break, P is paragraph, B is bold, I is italic. So it's not that hard to remember some of these things since they're related to what they do. So line break is basically just doing like a little line return within a paragraph. So if you didn't want to have that like extra padding or space in between 2 paragraphs and you just want to do a little line return, then you can do the line break HTML tag. This is a good example of when you have tags that don't have an open and a closed tag. Break, a line break is just a line break. There's nothing in between, right? It just goes to the next line rather than having like text in between an open or closed tag. So for that, you can just do the BR, and most people do like a / afterwards to represent that this is just a single tag without a closed tag, but it'll work without that / after. So if it's just the BR with the carets, it'll still work. So you're going to come across that occasionally. There's a few other ones like break that don't have an open and close. Like image is one, IMG is one. Well, we'll talk about that in a couple weeks though. So for the line break, this is HTML code, and this is what it looks like when it's loaded in the browser. We have a little line break and a little return there. All right, any questions about those very basic HTML text tags? After this, we'll also do a little demo using Glitch to make like a very simple website. So I think once we start doing that, it'll help to make more sense. But I just want to run through it now, then we'll do the demo at the end. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is links. So these are called hyperlinks. So this is our HTML code for a link that The A represents anchor. This one is a little bit out there when it comes to like if it's similar to what it does, but technically, yeah, an anchor kind of makes sense for a link because you're anchoring to another location, another website when you click on it. So this is the page that the link takes you to when you click on the IMDb. So that's the full URL that you're going to go to when you click on it. This is the text that the user visually sees on the website that they actually click on. So when you click on that, it'll take you to this link. And then the href equals. So this is a little bit of more information inside this tag. This is the case for some other ones too, like image as well has more information, like where the image source is. So you're going to see this occasionally, but href represents hyperreference, which is the hyperlink reference. So where this link is going to take you. And then you set that equal to the link that you want it to go to in quotes. And then that's where it's going to go to when you click on it. The example I just showed you is like this example, it's a link, a hyperlink to another website. So we have href equals then HTTP, then www. So this is going to another website called empireonline.com. When you click on Empire, it's going to take you to that website. So it's going to replace the website that they're currently on with this website when they click on it. So this is HTML, and then this is what it looks like when it's loaded in the browser. By default, HTML turns it like, I think, a blue or a purple color and gives it an underline when it's a link. Again, all this could be changed with CSS once we get to CSS. You could also link to pages on your same site. So if you have like navigation at the top and you want to link to multiple pages, those are considered hyperlinks too. And then instead of doing like www dot to like a separate page, all you have to do is reference the name, the file name that you want to link to within your own root folder. So our homepage is going to be most likely index.html. We could have an about page, which is about.html. Then we can have a movies page, which is movies.html, and then a contact page, which is contact.html. So because all of these are in the same folder, all in the same root folder, all we need to know is the name of the file that we want to load when we click on home, about, movies, and contact. And then it'll load that file, the HTML file, when you click on it. So we don't need the like www.com, whatever, at the front of it because we're just going from one HTML file to another within our own root folder. So this is the code, HTML code, and this is what it looks like when you load it in the browser.
Can you go back to the, I'm sorry, I missed what's a U1 or U?
Yeah, so we didn't really talk about that. We're going to talk about that more in like 2 or 3 weeks. But this stands for unordered list, and the LI were
so
lit.
it will become the bullet points, right?
Yeah, so these are the bullet points. So
okay,
you can do a UL, which is unordered list, or an OL, which is an ordered list. If it's an OL, then it's going to have numbers instead of bullets. UL has bullets. So we'll talk about lists in a couple weeks, though. But yeah, sorry, that's a little confusing. I didn't really talk about that yet. So yeah, these bullet points are unordered lists, and that's what the UL represents. And the LI stands for a list point. So each individual bullet point is an LI. All right, so let's just kind of walk through this like file structure thing again. I think it'll be helpful to talk it through one more time. So our root folder is in this case called example arts. Then all of the contents inside of our root folder are the contents for our website. So those are called, the folders inside of the root folder are called the child folders. And then when we're going from the root directory to them, and then when we're going back the other way, it's called a parent folder. And the same thing if we have, like, if we go deeper into it, we have our grandchildren folders inside of movies, inside of our root directory. And then our grandparent folder. So when we go back from like cinema or DVD outside of movies to our root folder is our grandparent folder. So these are all relatives, essentially. These are all related to each other when it comes to the website we're putting together. So the relative URLs are going to be something like this. So when we're going from inside the music index file to reviews, we're just referencing, since we're in the same folder, we're just referencing reviews.html to get to it because they're both in the music folder. But if we are going from a parent folder to a child folder, so if we're on the home page and we want to go into the music folder to this index.html file, then this is the child folder we need to reference to. So we need to reference the folder, music, / and then the file name inside of that child folder. So it's very similar with the grandchild folder. So if we're on the home page and want to go to this index.html in the DVD folder, then we have to go into the child folder, which is the movies, and then the grandchild folder, which is DVD. And then we can get reference and get to that index.html file. So it's movies / DVD / index.html. When we're going the other way, we briefly talked about this earlier. So if we wanted to go to a grandparent, the ... takes us back one folder, takes us back one generation essentially. And if you do it again, it takes us back another generation. So if we're on the reviews.html page inside the DVDs folder and we want to get back to the home page, then we have to do ... / to get back to the movies folder, and another ... / to get back to the index.html, which is the main homepage file. So why don't we do a little review of this? So if I was on the homepage index.html and wanted to go to this listings.html page in music, what would the path be? So from here to here.
Music / listening.html.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we're going into the child folder, and then we can get to that file. Okay, what if I want to go to the reviews.html and in the cinema folder, and we're on the home page? So from here to here. You can type it in chat too if you want to, since it's just text. So index.html, which is our home page, to this reviews.html in the cinema folder. Close. Cinema and reviews, but we're missing one more. Since this is a grandparent or grandchild, we're missing one more. Yeah. So you have to go into movies, cinema, and then reviews.html. So let's say we wanted to go backwards. So if we were in, let's say, theater on the index.html page and wanted to go into the music folder and listings.html. So if we were here, but wanted to go here. So this one's a little tricky because we have to go out and then in to something. Yeah, / ... is going out. So that'll take us back to the root directory. And then how do we get to the listings.html inside of music? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so .. / to go back one generation. And then we can go into music, and then we can go into listings.html. So that's perfect. Cool. Does that make sense? Kind of clear? Again, the more we do it, the more we start like programming and getting our HTML together, the more it's going to make more sense.
I have a question. So it'll be a ... Also, if we want to go to DVD listings, and then
From
we
what?
just put, so let's say if I want to go to theater index to DVD index, would I have to go, I would do the same thing, ... movies first and then DVD?
Yeah. So it's ... / to get outside of theater and into the root directory. And then we can go into movies. So / movies, then into DVD / DVD.
Okay, got it.
Listings or whatever the file you want. So
Thank you.
it's all relative to where you currently are, what page you're currently on, and where you want to go when you click on that link. So it depends on if you're in this folder or in that folder or on the home page, and where you are relative to where you want to go. So another thing with links, hyperlinks, is that you can also do like a contact hyperlink to open up an email and have that person send an email to you. And that's, instead of doing like www dot whatever to go to a website, you would do mail to : and then the email address that you want them to mail it to. So yeah, this is another option. Is there a practice website? So we'll do a demo that you guys can follow along with after these slides, and that will probably be like the best practice website they can work on. Another great thing about Glitch is that you can, when you create a new like static website in Glitch, it gives you like an existing website to either delete and kind of get rid of and start from scratch, or you can use what they give you to like modify. They give you basically a template to start with, which is nice of them. So I'll show you that when we start using Glitch. Another great thing about Glitch is that it was initially created for sharing code and sharing ideas that are programmatic and sharing websites. Most of you can kind of go through their library of sites that the community has shared and then remix it and kind of modify it to your own purposes. So yeah, it's a really great site, really great community, really great examples on there. And they also give you really great like templates to start with when it comes to building a site or a project of any kind. So yeah, I'll show you, we'll do a walkthrough with Glitch in a minute. So yeah, so with email links, when you click on this, it's just going to open up in whatever email platform you use or whatever the user is using. It's going to open it up and automatically put the 2 to the email address that you put into the hyperlink. I think you could also auto-populate the subject too, and maybe auto-populate like the body copy. So you could do a lot of stuff too, beyond just the email address. Another thing when it comes to hyperlinks is that you could also choose whether you wanted to open up in a new tab or a new window, or replace the website that they're currently on. So if you don't want to replace like your website with whatever they click on, then this is probably a better option. This is what I would suggest, is using a target equals _ blank in quotes. And that's going to open up this IMDb site in a different tab or a different window. It's usually bad practice to have them, the user go away from your own website if you can avoid it. So rather than having them go to a different site and replacing your website, you can just open up a new tab or open up a new window to have them take a look at it. So this is HTML, and this is what it looks like in the browser. Along with like linking to another page on your own website, or linking to a website, someone else's website, or having it pop open like an email to send you a contact information. You could also link to different areas on your own web page. So you might have seen this on like other websites called that use this, called parallax scrolling. When you have a navigation at the top and you click on the navigation and it scrolls down to a section on that web page, that's what they're doing here basically. They're just adding a little bit of like flair and color with the coding in JavaScript, so it's scrolling nicely rather than without it, it's just going to like jump to that section. To do that, you have to add an ID to the section that you want to jump to. And then you can link, instead of doing a link to an HTML page or like another website, you can do a hashtag, $, and then the name of the ID where you want to jump to. So here we have prologue as a header. And in this link, when you click on the prologue link, is going to go to the prologue ID, wherever that may be on your web page. So it's just going to jump to that section on your web page. So we have prologue, and that when you click on that, it's going to jump to the prologue ID on your web page. Then we also have a top button at the bottom. And when you click on that, it's going to jump to the top ID, which is at the very top of the page. Go back to the top. So this is an option if you wanted to like do, rather than going from one page to another page, you can go from one section of your web page to another section of your web page using this method. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a glitch.com demo. And then I'll talk about the homework. And feel free to, actually, it's probably a good idea for you guys to follow along with me. So why don't we all go to glitch.com. Once we go to glitch.com, we have the option to sign up or log in. If you click on sign up or go to glitch.com/sign up, then you can sign up using any one of these options. So you can log in with Facebook, which I usually do not recommend. You can log in with GitHub. You can log in with your Google account, which probably makes the most sense. And then you can also do like an email magic link if you wanted to. All right, so I'm just gonna sign in since I already have an account. I use Google. Okay, when you sign in, you should see something like this. It might be different if you are signing in for the first time. But the most important thing that we need to have access to is at the top right, there's a new project button. So we can go ahead and click on that, and it'll show you a bunch of different options for different types of projects that you can create. So there's a basic one at the top, which is the one we're probably going to use, which is just a basic web page. There's, if you want to do like a Node.js app, there's an example for that, a React app. I don't know what 11t is, but it sounds like it's a blogging platform. If you're interested in creating some sort of database, there's an example for that you can use as a starting point. There's other ones too. And then if you use GitHub, then you can also import a GitHub sketch as well, or GitHub projects. So let's go ahead and click on Glitch Hello website. Cool. So how it's set up is our root directory is on the left-hand side. Our coding environment is in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, you can visually see what it's going to look like in the browser. And you can kind of change the size of this if you wanted to. But this is what it's going to look like when it's loaded in the browser. You can see it, if you go to show at the top, you can see it next to the code or in a new window. And this is the link that you would probably want to share with whoever you want to share the website with. But the majority of the time when you're programming, you're going to have it set up like this. So on the right-hand side, it gives you a bunch of stuff. Probably most of it, a lot of it you're not going to need initially. Like this README. READMEs are usually meant for like more complex programmatic projects that have that need some documentation explaining what the website's all about and how to like install it or use it or run it. To do is just another kind of like programmatic thing behind the scenes where you can have like to-do lists or what needs to be created or added to the website. Again, you probably don't need that. License information, yeah, it's nice to have, but again, it's probably not needed for our usage. Git ignore, again, not needed for what we're doing. The only thing that we are going to be focused on is the index.html file and the style.css file. Even then, we don't need style.css yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minify this and make this as basic as possible and delete a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to, if you click on the three buttons on the right-hand side, can say delete to each one of these things. Let's delete everything that we don't need. Delete the license, delete the README, delete the to-do. Let's delete the JavaScript. And let's also delete the CSS, because we're not going to talk about CSS for a couple weeks. So now, if you look at the web page, you see that changed drastically, right? That's because we deleted the CSS, and now all the styles have been deleted and removed as well. So now all we have is the HTML file and the assets. And our assets folder is just going to be like all of our images, all of our fonts, any videos, anything that we want to load, any sort of media that we want to load on our webpage is going to go in assets. So right now, let's just go to the HTML index.html file. And it's nice that it gives you all this information as part of the template, and you might want to use that in the future. But for what we're going to do, we're going to just kind of minify this and get rid of most of it. So I'm just going to delete everything except for the HTML tags. So this is all I want to have right now. So the docutype HTML, this actually probably isn't needed, to be honest. Then the HTML tags, and you can select define the language you're writing your website in. So in this case, it's English, but again, that's probably unnecessary for what we're doing. But we could keep it in there if you want. Okay, so we have our bare bones HTML web page. So in here, the two HTML tags that we always want to start with are head and body. So I'm going to add my head. The nice thing is that it automatically creates an in tag for you as well. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. Okay, so we have our head, and then we have body. So as I close this open tag, it's going to automatically give me a close tag, which is like super helpful. So we have our HTML tags, then our head tag, and our body tag. In head, let's just give this a title. This is what's going to show up at the top of the browser window. This is my first website. Yay. Okay. And then we won't see it here because it's not showing the top of the browser window. So we can see this in a new window. And it says, this is my first website. Yay. So that works. So now inside the body, this is kind of like our meat and potatoes, right? This is all the content that we want to load on the web page. So this is going to be like our headers and paragraphs and images and links, et cetera, are going to go in here. So let's just go ahead and do an H1. Say this is a header. So exciting. And then it automatically should update on the right-hand side for you. But if it doesn't, you, I think, can hit this reload button. All right, so let's do a key tag. Say this is a paragraph. La-di-da. La-di-da. I think we could also do word wrap too. Let me try and turn that on. Yeah, let's do word wrap.
I have a question. Might be a little silly, I guess. Why does certain words, like let's say, like the on line 5, like there's a slash for the word, or like, and then 6 there's no slash. Like, what does that signify again?
Yeah, so if there's no slash, that means it's an open tag, like the beginning of that tag, and then If there is a slash, that's the close tag. So all of that contents that you want
Oh,
to
okay,
hide is
yeah.
going to go in between those. So that's like the box essentially that I was talking about before. And
Oh, I see the HTML, and then it's closed all the way down there.
the cool thing about this programming environment and pretty much most of all the other ones that it changes the color based off of whether it's like an HTML element or not, or if you're doing JavaScript or CSS, it'll change the color if it's like a part of that programming library. So you know that the black parts, the black text is just going to be like the contents, and the blue part is going to be the tag itself, the HTML tag. Also, if you like highlight the beginning tag, it'll show you highlighted the end tag too. So if it gets confusing, like where's my end tag? Where did I end this stupid thing? If you double click on the open tag, it'll show you highlight the close tag too. So there's a lot of really great benefits about using an environment like this or like Sublime Text or some of the other ones, because it like does autocomplete, it does color coding for you. It helps with like finding bugs that you might not see like right off the bat. So yeah, these are great programming environments to play around with. Okay, so why don't let's do like bold. Let's do this as B. So then the only bad thing is that if you want to wrap something, you have to like delete what you did. Delete the autocomplete. So now the Lottie is bold. And let's do this as italic. Yeah, autocomplete. La-di-da. Let's do another header, like an H2. This is a subhead. And let's do another paragraph after that. Let's do like a bunch of random. I could do like the space thing. So there's like a lot of empty space that shouldn't be there. Automatically just closes that. Let's see, what else should I do? Let's do another paragraph. Say, let's add this a link in here. href equals. What should we take this to? Let's try Queen's College website. So href is going to go there. Oops. And then Queen's College website. So when I click on that, it's probably gonna, yeah, didn't like that. So let's go ahead and let's add a target equals, in quotes, underscore blank. And then try that again. Maybe it doesn't do that in the preview area. Oh, there we go. So for some reason, the links don't work properly inside this like preview window. So if you go to show and then open in a new window, then it works fine. Yeah. Is there anything else you guys wanted me to demo or do? Why don't we add another page in here? So let's create a new file. Let's do a folder too. Music. Songs.html. So to create a new folder and a new file in Glitch, you just have to say new file and then say what the folder's name is and then the HTML page name is. So I'm just gonna create another HTML web page called songs.html. So again, I went to new file, created a new folder and file, and then added it here. So I'm gonna just do HTML. Okay, so then back in index.html, let's just add a link at the top. To music/songs.html. And give it some text, songs page. And we could do the same thing. Actually, let's just start there. So now when we click on songs page, it'll take you to the songs page.
So when you make the music, you want a new file, right?
Yeah, so to make a new file and folder, then you give it a folder name, like, I don't know, movies, and then / and then the file name.
Okay.
Something like that. And then hit add this file, and it'll create the folder for you and the file name.
Oh, okay. So, okay, that makes sense for me because I was like, wait a minute, am I doing something wrong?
Yeah, it's a little weird. I thought it would be like a button for create a file and then a button for create a folder separately. But yeah, that's how you kind of do it in here. And I can
Oh,
fit this in like music. You want to create another one? You just do that. I'll add it to the music folder.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and then the great thing about Glitch is that you can share it. So you can make it public, private, or make the code private. You can invite like project members. So you can invite me, which is just dwoo, I think. Well, actually, yeah. So I'm just dwoo. So you can send me an invite, or there's another Danny in this world. Oh yeah. I think I have multiple accounts, but let's use the one that's dwoo. If you want to share anything with me, so we can like collaborate on code, and I can go in and help bug test. And then for like sharing with like the class, then you could probably just use this link, which is sharing the code, and then we could look at your code and the website itself versus the live site. So this is probably what you want to share with us on Slack. So we could look at the code as well as view the live site. Cool. If you want to change the name up here, you can do that. So it's just going to be like whatever.glitch.com, I think. So I'm going to change mine to like QC Web Fall 21 HTML. And then you can change like the description. This is a HTML website example. So now if I go to like new window, then I'll see QC web fall 21 html.glitch.me. So this is if you send that to anyone, then they'll see your website, as long as it's public, which by default I think it is. That's basically it. Do you guys have any questions?